And so, here we have part 2 of my full Minecraft Dungeons, well, almost full guide because I don't include a lot of ranged support, but I did what I could. Anyway, yeah, in the last video that I uploaded earlier today, I didn't give a proper outro because that wasn't really the end of the guide. I just wanted to have this be its own separate video because this is probably what a lot of people would want to look at. I just wanted to provide that little bit of the rest of this guide here just as a, just to give you all the information that you would need to make your own decisions, but if you just want to hear about what you want to run for the weapons or how they best work, this is going to be a lot quicker than if I made one for every, like a video for every single weapon type. Yeah, like I said, this does not include all of the enchantment combos that you can run on the weapon. These are just the more effective ones. This isn't like the, oh, if you're not running these enchant combos, it's bad. I mean, there's still, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of bad enchant combos out there, and I will tell you straight up if they're bad. But there's others that, while they're not as good, I won't straight up say that they're bad, they're just not the most effective. And just like before, I'm going to start the way that I did with my videos, with the sword, and I just kind of gave a little bit of flavor text. I didn't really talk a whole lot in depth about the weapons too much, except maybe a little bit later when I got better ideas for them. But yeah, like I'd mentioned in my video before, Sword, Diamond Sword, Hawkbrand, Sinister Sword, they're all pretty standard weapons. They have middling reach, middling damage. The reach actually not as good as it looks like it should be. Their speed is okay. Very, how would I explain it maybe? Like bread and butter weapons, they're not the best but not the worst either. They don't specialize in everything exactly, or in anything, but they can use the general stuff really well. Very solid. What you would want to run on that, for pure damage would be like Void Strike, Enchanting, Committed, and Leeching. But like I said, more effective strategy would be 2 damage enchants and 1 like defense or utility. So for that you could use Void Strike, Enchanting, Leeching, and any of Guarding Strike or Refreshment if you're using Potion Barrier, or even Gravity if you want, because they use Gravity pretty well. Or you could just go with double healing, go Void Strike, Enchanting, Leeching, and Radiance. Although overall, you will get more defense and to some extent more healing too, just by Guarding Strike alone, because you're cutting the damage you're taking in half. So that in itself, like the HP that you save, you can consider that HP that you've recovered. Like you can run stuff like Exploding, you can run Weakening, it's just these ones I found to be the most effective, not the only effective ones, just if you want the most effective and synergistic builds. And like I mentioned with the axe before, it's a little bit less speed, a little bit more damage than a sword, and it naturally has a bit more range. The main difference though is that it does have a 360-degree spin to its attacks, so while you can run the same enchants as a sword like Void Strike, Enchanting, Committed, Leeching, or do Guarding Strike or Refreshment instead, since it does have that 360-degree spin and it has really wide swings, you can run Weakening to affect as many enemies at a time as you can. It's very nice. Just in terms of comparing it to a sword, it does have lower DPS somewhat. Void Strike does help it out a little bit because it does favor weapons that are a bit slower. But yeah, like it's Void Strike actually does come out to, on a sword, say 50-60% more damage per second. So it is better than Committed if you have to choose between the two. And it multiplies all damage that an enemy's taking as well. So this will get a bit more use out of it, but it won't have more DPS in total. And since, even though it does have a little bit more reach and more knockback, it won't keep enemies from hitting you. And when you have Guarding Strike on your weapon, you don't care about the hits you're taking. You can just shrug it off and heal it right back up. So I would still say a sword overall is better, but for Axe, Firebrand, and Highland, this is still very solid, very comfy to use it. Then there's the Diamond Pickaxe and the Pickaxe. Bit different from swords, they have more narrow reach, but they're a lot stronger in their individual hits, so even though they are slower than both swords and axes, they actually have more DPS than either of them. The downside, like I mentioned, is they have narrow reach, so for support, they might prefer running, say, Gravity to hold mobs in that one small spot. But in general, yeah, you can run full damage if you want to, just won't be the most effective. The difference is that, yeah, you could run one with Gravity because it really does help funneling mobs into that narrow point. Or otherwise, if you want, you could just run Guarding Strike with or without Gravity. I would prefer just running full damage with Guarding Strike. You don't need to group up a lot of enemies when you have Guarding Strike, you just have to make sure you're killing one enemy every 4 seconds. And with Refreshment as well, you want to kill... actually, it's not too bad to run Gravity there then, because you'll be killing more mobs at a time because you need multiple kills basically to get Refreshment to refill your potion. So there is some precedent for that, but Otherwise, you can still run very solid with Void Strike and Enchanting along with them. Next would be Hammer and Stormlander, and yes, there is a reason why Hammer of Gravity is not listed here, and that is because I didn't want to have like separate entries for each weapon, like they'd have to read and like differentiate. It's because there is a setup for these weapons that use gravity, because their hit, it's a pretty wide area, but it's still also narrow at the same time because it's right in front of you, so you can run gravity to group enemies into those hits to hit all of them at once, because Hammer and Stormlander, and even Hammer of Gravity, they have okay damage per hit. It's weaker than a Pickaxe, and it's slower than a Pickaxe too, so their killing power is not all that great. Plus, they're not really good with their reach, like whether it be like area around you or distance in front of you, and they're not fast. So they're not good for defense, they're not good for utility, they're only subpar for killing. But if you run it with Guarding Strike, any weapon can be godly, so that would be my recommendation here. Otherwise, yeah, it's pretty much the same as a Pickaxe. Actually, like exactly the same too. Just doesn't need gravity as much, but it does run really well with gravity. The knockback can be kind of nice too, but its reach does make it hard for you to really keep mobs away from hitting you before you kill them. Next you have Hammer of Gravity, and it is by far the best of the three weapons because the built-in Thundering of Stormlander, with it being level 1 and the weapon being slow, isn't doing many favors for it, but this inherently grouping mobs up, really nice for killing big groups, and it frees you up for running full damage with the gravity built in. You could run Guarding Strike instead, you can run Refreshment, and because it has gravity built in, you can use it with Exploding to kind of keep mobs grouped up in those explosions, and it can feel really satisfying and kill really fast with that. Next we have Claymore, Great Axeblade, Broadsword, and Frostslayer. And they are different from, again, Heartstealer, just like with the Hammer of Gravity, because they do have a different enchantment that they can run. Well, because it has a built-in enchantment, that makes it different. This is a lot like a sword and other things. You can either run full damage, you know, with Committed, Void Strike, and Enchanting, or you can go Guarding Strike or Refreshment. Again, very straightforward. They're just a little slower. Actually, a lot slower, but a lot stronger, and they have more knockback than swords, so you might find them a bit more favorable, especially for their reach. The difference, though, between them and Heartstealer is that Heartstealer has leeching built in, so you don't have to run leeching on the... Well, you can't run leeching on the weapon, so you can focus more on just pure damage. So yeah, it can hit a lot harder, but you'd still probably want to use Guarding Strike. This is my Heartstealer, and it runs so good, just insanely well. So yeah, you don't have to worry at all, even if it has level 1 leeching, because that Guarding Strike will more than make up for it. I would say it's probably the best out of all of the Claymore weapons, just for being able to run the extra damage enchant, because it is more useful than just having level 1 sharpness built in, and the leeching being level 1 doesn't matter all too much. I mean, you could try using Radiance if you want to, but at this point it's really not needed when you have Guarding Strike and everything. Again, like I said, yeah, I do only have 3 setups for these weapons, but you can run more. It's just these are the 3 best ones. Some people like to call a lot of things God rolls. I have things called good rolls and I have God rolls. God rolls are like the best of the best, and good rolls are like, I'll keep it, I'll take it, but if I get better, then I'll replace it. That's basically where I'm at when I think of stuff like that. And then we come to a different weapon from Claymores entirely. These are smaller, they're lighter, they'll make you feel like a pirate, or like Thanos if you're using this one here. Or you can feel like you're, this doesn't look so much like a sparkler, it looks like a torch that's about to explode. But yeah, Cutlass, Nameless Blade, Dancer Sword, and Sparkler, very peculiar weapons because they have middling DPS and fast speed, along with decent areas, so they can run standard sets, but they can also make use of things like, here you can see Leeching and Radiance because of their speed. They can use Shockwave and Swirling, even though they don't make the best use of Radiance with their speed, so you'd want to pair it with things like Stunning to help keep enemies from hitting you. But in general, the tried and true full damage with Leeching, or damage with Guarding Strike and Leeching, or damage with Refreshment and Leeching, those will be your best friends, especially with Nameless Blade, because Nameless Blade has that built-in level 1 weakening, which even at level 1 is still really nice for extra defense. It's one of my, I would say, favorite weapons. Then next we have Mace, Flail, and Sun's Grace. These weapons have amazing power, but they do have low speed, but that doesn't really hurt them too much. In fact, actually having lower speed because of Void Strike actually helps them a little bit. So they're definitely above average when it comes to damage. Because of the way they swing, you can make use of the gravity of them, or because they have that one spin move, you can use weakening because it hits all around you, and you only have to hit once, so just spinning once per combo, it's still very nice for reducing enemy damage. Overall though, yeah, you can run the same full damage. You can run Guarding Strike with weakening if you want to, but I prefer Guarding Strike with Enchanting and Void Strike. You can run a potion or a refreshment build. Very solid either way. Definitely would say Sun's Grace is the best of them just for the extra healing, but Flail's not too bad either. And you got Sickles, Last Laugh, and Nightmare's Bite. They have fast speed and decent-ish damage, but it's still kind of low, so it combines for decent DPS and the ability to run either Leeching or Radiance or both. And the speed opens them up to other more support or other damage enchants, like you can run Thundering, you can run Stunning, you can run Chains. So you can run the standard like full damage Enchanting, Critical Hit, Committed, and Radiance. Because they're kind of fast, you don't really want to use Void Strike because you won't get that much extra damage from them. You could do Enchanting, Critical Hit, Gravity, and Radiance just for grouping enemies into the small hitbox. You can do Enchanting or Gravity along with Committed, Radiance, and Leeching. You can do Stunning plus Gravity along with either Ambush if you want that extra damage, or you could use Chains just to like fully shut down enemies that are both in front of you and ones that are further away so that they can't get closer. Or you can also try a Thundering build where you use Lightning Focus along with either do Enchanting for like full damage or Gravity to group enemies into it. And if you want to, since you already do have this damage here, you could also replace Enchanting like in Committed spot and use Gravity instead with the Thundering and Enchanting. It depends. This was just what I felt would be more balanced, especially because you might want to run Enchanting with these two enchants. But yeah, very fun weapons, I love them. Especially Nightmare's Bite with Spider Armor, looks so good. Next you've got Spear, Fortune Spear, and Whispering Spear, and they are the OG kings of absurd weapon reach. Like the last hit of their combo, I believe, does have the most reach unless the anchor slightly beats it out. But even then, the pushback from the weapon makes them use gravity so well for keeping enemies away from hitting you. Though, whereas they are the kings, there is a queen bee that they have to contend with as well. But yeah, they can run the standard full damage like Committed, Enchanting, Void Strike, and Leeching. The thing is though that because they have narrow reach and because they can hit from so far away, you can play super defensively with gravity because all the enemies will get pulled into that one spot and they will be held at that distance away from you while the weapon is constantly pushing them away so that they just can't get to you. And especially because Whispering Spear has Echo built in, you get an extra hit every 5 seconds to help push them back. But still, they don't need gravity, it's just they perform even, like, it gives them a unique use that other weapons don't have. Otherwise though, you can totally run just full damage, or you can do Guarding Strike in place of Gravity, or you can use it with Gravity if you want to as an option, or you can use Void Strike and Refreshment along with Gravity and Enchanting, just like with the Pickaxe here. It's your choice. I prefer just to run the Gravity one. In fact, I only have this setup for all of them because you don't really need Guarding Strike too much as long as you have Ironhide Amulet, Gong of Weakening, and Gravity to keep them pushed back. And actually, similarly, you can do the same thing with a Glaive, a Venom Glaive, and a Grave Bane. They're a little bit different because while they do have 2 narrow hits and they hit far away, they don't have as much reach as spears do, and their final hit does actually hit really wide, so this makes them a little bit less effective with gravity, though still crazy good at keeping enemies away. However, they don't need gravity as much because they do have that extra wide hit that will hit everything. And you could argue that that could give you precedent to use weakening just for that last hit, but it's not quite the widest hit in the game, and it is only 1 hit in the combo. I would save that more for if you have a weapon that has a single hit in the combo that's all around you, which is really good for weakening. Otherwise though, yeah, Grave Bane I think is still my favorite weapon, if not that, the beginning and the end, just because if you know me from my Sword Art Online videos, I love dual wield. I just think it's so cool and badass, even if it's not the best for defense, but you can still use it for defense. Barbarians and stuff, they would use dual weapons a lot of times. If they were smaller handheld, but usually I like using a shield. I'm not a shield fan myself. But yeah, very fun weapons. Next we've got the Battlestaff, and yes, each staff does have its own entry, and that is because Battlestaff, for one thing, is a faster weapon than both of its 2 uniques, so that actually lets it use an extra set, which would be with Stunning, because Like I mentioned in the stunning enchantment section in the last video, it does have 4.6 hits a second, which makes it fairly good for using stunning, because that lasts for like, I would say 2 to 3 seconds, and it takes like 6.6 hits to stun, so you can keep an enemy stun locked fairly easily as long as you get that first stunning in. And for this, you can use it with, you can do gravity to keep all the, to group all the close by enemies into the stun lock so that they can't attack, and any enemies that are further away, you can chain them up so that they can't get to you. You just gotta watch out, because like I said, if they're ranged enemies, they can still shoot at you. And then here you can either use Leeching or Radiance, because Leeching is solid, but since you have no damage on this weapon, you might prefer Radiance better. Other than that though, the weapon can totally run just full damage builds. It can run Guarding Strike. It makes a lot of use of gravity for its narrow hits, and you can also pair that up with Weakening if you want to. It's just a very solid all-around weapon, and even though this only looks like 5 builds, each slash here is basically like another build. So you can use, Leeching or Radiance, that's 2 right there. It's just they're very similar, so... Whoops, clicked on the wrong spot. So it's almost the same build. Next we have Battlestaff of Terror. And now this has just as powerful of a combo as the Battlestaff. Like, when I'm not running any damage enchants on this, because I have this same Battlestaff here, actually I think mine has Gravity, Stunning, Exploding, and Leeching. Another combo you can run, I just forgot to mention it here. It still hits really hard, so yeah, Battlestaff of Terror also hits hard. It's just, since it's not as fast, it doesn't land as many hits in that same time, so it is a little bit slower with killing. But it does make up for that with making enemies explode, which, on its own, it's like, an extra 20% of the enemy's health taken away from other mobs nearby, which does make it pair really well with Gravity, just grouping all enemies in. But it's very nice for using against reviving creepers from a certain Weaver, if you know which one I'm talking about. Just a huge pain in the butt, but also it just looks really cool, and the explosions are really fun too. It makes it look more like a magical staff. But yeah, in terms of pure damage, actually Battlestaff is better than Battlestaff of Terror. However though, the best one for that would be Growing Staff, because even though it is slower than a Battlestaff, it has Committed built in, which is why for this pure damage build here you see Critical Hit instead of Committed, because you can't enchant that on it. But it does have really good killing potential, even if you don't have any damage enchants on it, but it doesn't run utility as well as a Battlestaff, so I would still say the best one that I have run was, I think mine was Void Strike, Enchanting. So Void Strike, Enchanting, Guarding Strike, and Leeching. But you can run it with Gravity if you want. You can do Refreshment instead of Void Strike. You could do just Gravity with Void Strike and double healing, because Void Strike is really good even on this speed. It's just very solid all around. You can do a lot of stuff with it. And if you get one with the right enchantments, you will see why it deserves a spot at least in S tier, if not in between S and SS, because it's really powerful and it makes really good use out of Guarding Strike, which is the best weapon enchant that you can get. As long as you have healing at least. Next we get a little bit more mundane. You got Katana, Dark Katana, and Master's Katana. Now, even though they're not as powerful as a Growing Staff, they make up for that with just being really flashy, nice weeb bait. Just, if you like anime, this is maybe the weapon for you. It doesn't run a whole lot of things, but this is quite a few builds in one. You've got, Void Strike, Enchanting, Committed, Leeching, or you could run Void Strike, Committed, Guarding Strike, and Leeching. Actually, I don't know why I don't have Enchanting here. I might have forgotten to change it. So, you could run Committed if you want, but I would actually personally say Enchanting. So let me change that and say Void Strike, Enchanting, Gravity, Leeching, Void Strike, Enchanting, Guarding Strike, Leeching, or Void Strike, Enchanting, Refreshment, Leeching. You can just run any of those builds there. I just wanted to make it a bit more short and sweet, but there is quite a few builds right there. It's not just 2. And even though Master's Katana is better because it does have crit built in, which works on all mobs, whereas this one has smiting built in that's only good for undead. I mean, look at it. It just looks so cool. If any of you have played Dark Souls 3, that is Frayed Blade right there, and that's why I ran Swirling and Shockwave on it for the longest time, just to mimic the 2 specials that you could do with its weapon arts. I was going full weeb mode there. Next we have Daggers, Fangs of Frost, and Sheer Daggers. They have decent damage per hit, it's a little over 200,000. Well, at least compared to Fighter's Bindings, they have decent damage, but compared to other weapons, it's really low. They get their damage per second from fast hits. So because they hit fast and they don't have the best damage per hit, that makes them use things like Stunning, Thundering, stuff like that really well, and you can run a lot with them. You can run full damage, Enchanting, critical hit, committed, and Radiance, because they don't use Void Strike all too well with their speed. You could do double healing, because it has the speed to use both. For Enchanting, committed, Radiance, and Leeching. You could do full damage with Enchanting and committed along with Guarding Strike, or Refreshment. You could try Gravity if you want, but the weapon's reach still isn't the best for it. Like I said before, you could run Stunning along with Gravity. In this case, I would recommend Gravity, but you could go without. But yeah, you would want to use it along with Ambush for the extra damage, or you could use Chains just to hold enemies off, or you could do Enchanting, Ambush, Chains, or Committed plus Radiance. Very solid. Like I said, you could run a Thundering build either for full damage with Enchanting and Committed, or you could do Stun Lock with Thundering, whether you want to use also Enchanting, or if you want to use Ambush. All in all, pretty fun weapons, so just a little bit lower in the level of comfort. Unlike Moon Daggers though, and the reason why I have this as a separate entry is solely because since they have Enigma Resonator built in for that extra 30% more damage, you could feasibly run Leeching instead of Radiance, so that's why I have builds here that have Leeching replacing it. But aside from that, you do have the other builds that use Leeching and Radiance, but not too much else changes. If you're using less damage-focused builds, especially if you're using Lightning or Thundering that doesn't trigger Leeching if it gets the kill, then you want to run Radiance still instead. Otherwise though, yeah, if you want to use Daggers and you care more about the stats and killing power, Moon Daggers is what you want the most. Then next we have everyone's favorite weapon along with Fighter's Bindings, the Cursed Double and Whirlwind Axes. So yeah, Double Axe, Cursed Axe, and Whirlwind are the embodiment of the best offense as a good defense. Actually though, thinking that it could be vice versa, because their 360-degree AoE swings make them great at killing large groups, just if you throw yourself in the middle of them, while utilizing weakening to its fullest to hit as many mobs at a time as you can. Even better than their axe cousins, since every hit of a Double Axe or its uniques is a 360-degree swing. And now, while the built-in shockwave of Whirlwind, like I said before, can block things like Leeching, Refreshment, or Guarding Strike, it's still fair damage if you want to use it, and Exploding from Cursed Axe is really good for keeping pressure off you, and just destroys Abominable Weaver. Those 360-degree swings, if you combine it with Gong of Weakening, and just full damage, you can destroy everything there without anything even touching you. But for that, yeah, you could run full damage. Like I mentioned with a lot of things so far, you could run it instead of Committed, use Guarding Strike, or you could use Refreshment. You could do Weakening instead of Guarding Strike because of the swings, or you can go crazy and do Guarding Strike and Weakening along with Void Strike, because honestly, Void Strike is enough damage by itself, and this defense, especially if you pair it with that Stalwart armor that I mentioned in the other video, just the one that has cooldown, chilling, deflect, and snowball, you're so tanky with it, you take just baby damage from everything. Next we've got Soul Knife and Truth Seeker, and they are part of one of the two lines of dedicated soul weapons, which I already mentioned before. These ones have fairly good support for a soul build, but they more focus on if you want damage with your weapon. If you're running a soul build, you would want to use it mainly with Echo for the extra chance to trigger Soul Siphon. You could also run it with Void Strike or Guarding Strike if you want, but I wouldn't recommend it totally. But you definitely would want to run the three Anima Conduit, Soul Siphon, and Enigma Resonator Soul Enchants. And then aside from that, if you want to use melee, there's a few options that you have. You have obviously Void Strike and Enchanting for the damage. You could use Enigma Resonator for the 50% more damage if you have a full soul meter, but if you want, you could also use Committed. But since the weapons have narrow hit reach, you could use Gravity instead, or you could just go with Guarding Strike and Refreshment. Nothing really wrong with running either of them. My Truth Seeker is, I believe it's, that one might be Guarding Strike and my Soul Knife might be the full damage, and then my Eternal Knife is running Gravity. And the reason why I have this in a different spot is mainly because this one has Soul Siphon built in, so it does change what you would want to run for a soul build, which would be Void Strike, plus any of these three. I would definitely recommend, though, Echo, and if you want, you could also replace Void Strike with Enchanting, since you do already have a damage enchant here with Enigma Resonator. But then you also have Anima Conduit to get the most base soul gathering that you can. But for melee builds, it is the exact same setup you can run. You know, full damage, some damage with Gravity, damage with Guarding Strike, or with Refreshment support. And speaking of souls, you have the other soul weapons, the scythes, and luckily these are all the same for their purposes, so I can have them all in the same box. That'll be Soul Scythe, Jailer's Scythe, and Frost Scythe. This one having chains built in at level 1, and Frost Scythe having level 1 freezing, which originally I thought it makes it better, but freezing just does nothing, not even at level 3. But yeah, Soul Scythe, Jailer's Scythe, and Frost Scythe are the other of the two lines of dedicated soul weapons. Their higher speed, lower damage, and wider reach makes them better for farming souls with Soul Siphon, and for using weakening too. Though for melee itself they aren't as strong, but their wider reach might make them more attractive, especially since they don't hit as much damage per hit, so you will have less chance of killing yourself on Thorns enemies. But yeah, for soul builds you would mainly want to run weakening with the 3 soul enchants. You can also use Void Strike as an option, really would recommend weakening. For melee, then, it is basically just, you know, the same enchants minus gravity from the soul knives, because you don't really need gravity for these. Yeah, you'll notice a trend. A lot of these enchants for a lot of the purposes will be the same. For Gauntlets and Fighter's Bindings, it does look like Fighter's Bindings, so you have a lot less enchants, but there's a lot of slashes that you can run different stuff. I just didn't want this to be a really long list. But talking about Gauntlets first, I do have them separate because they are different. They have a longer combo, which means they don't use Swirling or Shockwave as well. But also because of that, they can run Leeching. What you can run with them is just full damage. Even though they're a bit slower at the end of their combo, you still don't really want to run Void Strike, so you would want to run Crit and Committed with Enchanting. However, because they have really high knockback on their combo and they have low reach, you might want to run Gravity instead with Committed and Enchanting, or you could do Committed with Gravity and then double healing, which I use for my Maulers and some others, and it works pretty good. Or you could also run Ambush with Stunning and Gravity along with Radiance, and I did do this for a run that I haven't uploaded yet. It was for a level that I don't think I've played yet on the channel, and it worked really well. The Stunning, just from the first 4 punches with how fast it is, pretty much stun-locked everything before they could hit me, even with the low reach of these weapons. Aside from that, though, you can run one of 2 Thundering builds, which would be Committed, Radiance Thundering, and then either Enchanting or Gravity. Honestly, I don't know why I didn't just make this a slash. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. It depended on how I felt at the time. But yeah, it runs those pretty solid too. Now, Fighter's Bindings is different because whereas the Gauntlets and the other uniques of it have a 7-hit combo where it's first 4 punches and then like 2 little uppercuts and a slam that sends the enemy flying, Fighter's Bindings, the only difference for them is that their combo is just the first 4 hits over and over and over. This means that there is no chill in the combo, and even though those first 4 hits of the Gauntlet combo are the weakest, the sheer speed that it lands these hits gives it much higher DPS than either of the other Gauntlets combined. Well, not combined, just any of them in general, and even with Soulfist having Enigma Resonator built in, Fighter's Bindings still perform a lot better. And this allows them to unquestionably use Radiance more, and they also don't need Gravity quite so much. But because of this, you can run so many things with Fighter's Bindings. They are the OG of OP. Because they have low damage per hit, and they hit really fast, like I said, that makes them great for Radiance, and you don't hurt yourself as much on Thorns enemies for doing the same damage because you're healing a lot with Radiance. But not only do they have insane DPS, but like I said, they are better with Radiance than Leeching. I mean, Leeching can still be an option, but it's not needed, and that's why it's not an option here. It's also because you can run a lot of other enchant combos that don't work as much with Leeching. But yeah, these things can do offense, defense, utility, healing. The only thing that they lack is reach, but does not really matter for them at all. So yeah, you can run the classic, what I run with a lot of fast weapons, you know, Enchanting, Committed, Gravity, and Radiance. You'll notice again, these are so fast that Void Strike is going to add almost nothing because that multiplier is not rising much. You can do Committed or Chains along with Shockwave, Swirling, and Radiance. Chains being for if enemies are close enough to get hit by the punches, you can chain up other enemies and pick them off with Shockwave. However, if you're doing this, I would recommend having Anima Conduit on your ranged weapon, because if you're just focusing on getting kills with Shockwave, you're not going to be getting healed for that, and enemies with range are going to be pelting you, and you might not notice your health dropping. And I'm not saying that because I've done that before, but yeah, I've totally done that before. So yeah, having a support range with Anima Conduit, better if you want to do that. Otherwise, you could use Committed just to get in close and just do tons of damage. These also use Stunning really well. This is probably one of the most powerful ones that I've used, this right here. I've used this on the Soggy Cave daily trial for a video, and I did not have to potion at all, just because the stun lock alone was crazy along with the healing, but the extra damage from swirling, even if you're running it on Renegade armor, that combined with swirling is 100% more damage per second along with stunning. It's just crazy. And which is why I don't have ambush listed with stunning on here. But you can also run exploding if you want, it's just not as useful as it is on other weapons. Next you could do a thundering build that either, well, you want to use swirling with it as well, but then you can either use committed, you could use enchanting, you could use shockwave if you want, but you would do better with committed and cowardice combined instead. You could also though use it with gravity instead if you wanted to bunch enemies up. I actually do have one that is thundering, committed, gravity, and radiance, just so I have no extra effects. It just looks like lightning fists like that was it Zeraora from Pokemon? His Plasma Fist attack? Love that. Then you do have swirling, gravity, committed or enchanting, because this does count as a damage enchant that would cover normal mobs, so you could run enchanting instead with radiance. And also you've got enchanting, crit, committed, and radiance. For some reason I don't have guarding strike on here, even though I had it before, but yeah, I have a pair with enchanting, committed, guarding strike, and radiance, and it is insane. Like, anything with guarding strike is immediately godlike, but when you have it on a weapon that's already godlike to begin with, it just makes you beyond that. You are, what did Vegeta say? Non-believer status? What is a god to a non-believer? That's what it makes you. It makes you non-believer status. Anyway, next we've got whips. Just like spear weapons, the whip prides itself in long, narrow reach, making it wonderful for defensive gravity use. Though as I mentioned before, if you're hitting a group of enemies with a whip, only one enemy is going to be taking full damage, the rest are only going to be taking 10% of that damage. Still though, gravity is worth it because you're holding enemies off, so you can just, while they're being held in that spot, kill one enemy at a time while you're damaging the others, and it still works fairly good. Its one drawback is that it's bugged where it can't do full damage to all enemies. Because of that though, it runs pretty much the same thing that you would run on a pickaxe, that being Enchanting and Void Strike with Gravity and Leeching, or you could do Guarding Strike or Refreshment instead of Enchanting. Normally I don't like running Gravity with Guarding Strike or Refreshment because I like as much killing power, but whips, and especially the Vine Whip here, they really want it. The one difference between a Vine Whip and a Whip is that it has extra built-in jungle poison damage. Unlike Poison Cloud, this does apply every single hit, the enemies can't walk out of it, and the damage per second is crazy. It can reach well over 1,000,000 damage per second, which is much more than Poison Cloud, which is like 345,000 damage per second, or a little over 600,000 damage per second with Poison Focus. It's just not worth it. But on a Vine Whip, it's amazing, and especially because, like I said in the other video, Void Strike multiplies the damage of the poison as long as you're not landing any other hits. You can kill things with just one hit on an enemy, even from a Vine Whip. It is that good. And I did recently, like I said, found out that Void Strike was a multiplier, it was not a flat modifier, so you can run it with Sharpness because it will multiply that. But if you want, you can run Enchanting, because against enchanted mobs that will also double the poison damage per second, and with all these you definitely want to run Gravity, and then Leeching. The downside is that the poison damage can block Leeching, so as an option you could run it with just Void Strike, double Sharpness, and Gravity, or Sharpness and Enchanting along with any lifesteal armor like Wither or Spider along with Poison Focus. In general though, you can run any of these with Poison Focus because that's what I do. It kills so fast. Speaking of weapons that kill fast, these aren't any of them, the Rapier, Bee Stinger, and Freezing Foil. I just want to read this off because I really love these weapons even though they have low killing power. So Rapier, Bee Stinger, and Freezing Foil embody the idea that damage isn't everything. And I want you to repeat that. Damage isn't everything. I've had some people kind of arguing against it because they have low damage, but for favor of other weapons they will say damage isn't everything, but then they forget about it when it comes to this weapon. But yeah, what they lack in damage, though, they can still kill fairly fast. They make up for in everything else. They can stun lock safely with their reach and stunning, or they can just keep mobs away with their reach and gravity. They make the best use of exploding because they have low base damage. They get insane damage from thundering, or double healing with leeching and radiance. They're just so comfy to use even without Guarding Strike, Ironhide Amulet, or Gong of Weakening. And yeah, this is the queen bee right here of stun lock. Like, you can get through levels without taking a single hit because of that. And that build that I'm talking about would be this one right here, Gravity, Stunning, Radiance, and Exploding. This is probably my favorite one to use, and it is so good. Otherwise, what I used for an Ancient Hunt was Gravity, Radiance, Leeching, and well, it was crit, but Committed's a little bit better. And yeah, that can handle tier 3 trials as well. You could also go full damage with Radiance, using Thundering instead, because that is crazy, crazy damage, and also because Void Strike is bad on a fast weapon like this. Any weapon enchant combo here that has Thundering, you want to use Lightning Focus for more than 100% base damage onto the weapon. You could do Gravity with Thundering and Enchanting or Committed along with Radiance if you want to group enemies up. You could do Stunning with Chains if you want to, but I prefer Exploding. You could do Stunning with Ambush, but you will get more damage out of Thundering, especially with Lightning Focus. But yeah, in general, these weapons are great. You can do a lot of fighting without having to move whatsoever. My girlfriend and I actually killed an Enderman that way in the End Wilds. We just stood there holding the attack button and he could not get close enough to hit us. Kind of felt bad for him. Anyway, for other somewhat fast weapons, we've got Tempest Knife and Chill Gale Knife. They're very fun, fast weapons that give you a massive, albeit short, speed boost with every enemy that you kill. Though they're low reach and their knockback makes it hard to use them without using a slot for gravity. I mean, some people might like it, but when I first got the weapon back when that DLC came out, I hated the weapon because it was so hard to kill with, but once I got gravity on it, I was like, oh my god, it runs gravity so well. And yeah, that's now pretty much the staple, people saying that it can run without gravity. I won't say it can't, but personally I don't like it without gravity. It's just, it went from people liking it with swirling now to liking it with gravity because you have to land that third hit to get swirling to trigger, and you're not going to do that with this weapon's knockback. Not unless you have gravity with it. So good combo with it would be Enchanting and Committed with Gravity and Leeching. You could slip maybe Void Strike in there if you want to, but on average you will get more out of Committed. Or you could do Stunning, Gravity, Ambush, and Leeching. You could do Gravity, Committed, Leeching, and Radiance, because they are fast enough to use both enchants and use them pretty comfortably. Or you could do Guarding Strike, Weakening, or Refreshment with that combo as well. Either way, but you definitely would want Gravity because they are really hard to use without it. Same thing for the Resolute Tempest Knife. The only difference is that this has Committed built in, so wherever you would use Committed, instead you would want to use Crit. So in general, it does do more damage. That's pretty much the only difference. I just prefer Chill Gale Knife more because it has a cooler attack animation that looks like it should hit way further than it actually does. But yeah, very solid weapon, very fun. Can be somewhat hard to use, but still, anything with Guarding Strike and even double healing, very powerful. Next we have Broken Sawblade and Mechanized Sawblade. They are from the Nether DLC, and they are very unique weapons in how they operate. Their hits aren't affected by any attack speed buffs. And in fact, all that Deathcap Mushroom actually does is make them overheat faster. So when I was using it, I hated these weapons because I always ran everything with a mushroom, and it was making it so hard to use. The only benefit is you can use it with Shock Swirl to trigger them quicker, but it's not really worth using Deathcap Mushroom for. You can make use out of other artifacts. But yeah, their raw speed and their damage per second allows them to run either Leeching or Radiance, and they can also make use of Shockwave and Swirling if you rhythmically tap the attack button. So you have to tap it, you can't just hold the combo down and expect to see any of these trigger at the end of the combo when it overheats. You just want to tap it. You want to kind of mash it, but in some kind of a rhythm. I prefer to run it with Stunning for that extra support. But other things you can run is just full damage with either Leeching or Radiance. It doesn't matter too much which one. You could do Gravity and Enchanting with Committed and Leeching or Radiance. You could do Enchanting or Committed with Shockwave, Swirling, and Radiance, or Stunning instead. You could do Gravity with Committed and Stunning, or Committed or Stunning with Swirling and Radiance. Or you could do just Critical Hit, Committed, Pain Cycle, and Radiance or Leeching. And the reason because of this is because when you use Pain Cycle, it only actually hurts you at the end of your combo and not for every hit. And then when you trigger Pain Cycle, every hit of that combo, which is 24 hits for a Mechanized Sawblade, will have that 400% more base damage. And you can kind of trick the game into doing this earlier. If you tap the attack buttons, you can cycle through your Pain Cycle stacks quicker. And then when you have a stack of 4, you hold the next attack button down. So it will trick the game, and it will go through those 2 stacks, and your next combo will do a full 5 or 400% more base damage. The downside is that this can bug out a little bit, and it might cause every hit of the next combo to cycle through pain cycles, so you're not getting that extra damage, and you're hurting yourself with every hit. So I would not recommend this unless you're really confident or you just really want to YOLO it. But aside from that, yeah, they do run Guarding Strike and Refreshment really well with the 2 solid damage enchants and either 2 healing enchant just fine. Next we have the other nether weapon and a personal favorite of mine as well, the Boneclub and Bone Cudgel. In fact, Boneclub is my favorite out of the 2 just because it kind of looks like Cloud's Buster Sword, and I really love Final Fantasy VII. But yeah, these are the definition of hulking beat sticks. These resemble Cloud's Buster Sword, like I said, and these weapons sport really high damage and great knockback but low speed, but this does make them great for Guarding Strike, Void Strike, and even Echo use to some extent. I did use it for a time, but I did ditch it because you can just use Artifact Canceling, which, yeah, I mentioned that here too, it helps with that. So you can run full damage, like I'd mentioned before. You can run damage with Guarding Strike, with Weakening, because the weapon is pretty wide, and this did help me during a Tier 3 Windswept Peaks daily trial back before Guarding Strike was a thing. Now I'd way before this. This is very solid too, especially because it can help out teammates. Or you can use Refreshment, and if you really want, you can try Echo instead. I just, it doesn't pair very well anymore with, well, it never did pair with Void Strike, but I just mean Echo doesn't work so well anymore. I figured I'd mention it for old time's sake. Then we're moving on to the Hidden Depths DLC, which has 2 weapons as well. First one is Blade, and it is a fast weapon with really low damage and really low reach and area. Its speed isn't even the best on top of that. However, with its low damage and hits per combo, Shockwave, Swirling, even Thundering to an extent, they add the most out of any weapon. And it also does well with Stunning too. So yeah, I do have Thundering as an option. It still isn't the best user of it, but yeah, Swirling, like I'd mentioned in the other video, 95% more damage to the combo. Shockwave is over 70% more damage. It runs Stunning fairly well, so even though it has, you know, low damage, low reach, not even the best speed, it uses these things very solidly. You can use Leeching or Radiance. You could use Leeching and Radiance if you wanted to, but I don't have a build for that per se, just because the weapon is a bit harder to use for that. Still though, very solid. Then we have Sponge Striker. Now, I don't know why for some reason I forgot to mention this being with Lightning Focus. I should have done that. But aside from that, the difference between Sponge Striker and Coral Blade is only in that this weapon has the extra ability where any damage that you take during your combo, that damage is absorbed and dealt back to the enemies at the end of the combo. It is supposed to deal damage relative to what you take, that being in quotations, because what it actually does is like upwards of 8 billion or more, based on calculations I've done hitting the mines back when they could be killed, and I did like over 5, 6, 7, 8 million damage, and it still didn't kill them. It is insane, and no longer do Thorn's enemies get you killed from this, because before you used to take 12.5% of those billions of damage, and it just insta-killed you, even with Potion Barrier. But because you can deal this insane extra damage from the damage you take, you can run an extra build that uses Pain Cycle, because that will purposely trigger this crazy damage and let you just destroy mobs. But because of that, the kills from that damage bug, or possibly damage bug because the devs fixed Thorns one-shotting you, but they didn't fix the damage itself, that will not trigger things like Leeching or Guarding Strike or Refreshment or anything like that. And since that damage is so insane, other damage enchants don't matter. What you mainly would want to run is Pain Cycle for triggering that glitch damage, at least 2 Radiance to help counter that self-damage, and either Gravity for grouping enemies into it, or another Radiance to help you with healing. That's pretty much all you need to run until they maybe fix that damage bug, but I don't know if they ever are going to. Next, we've got the next 2 weapons of the Hidden Depths DLC, them being the Anchor and the Encrusted Anchor. How they work is they sport really low speed, the slowest speed in the game. You can land like 19 hits in 21.2 seconds with 125% attack speed, but they hit a really large area around you. They even hit behind you. On top of that, they have gravity built in and some inherent stun, so even though enemies have stagger resistance in Apocalypse plus 25, you can still stun them to an extent with these weapons, especially Encrusted Anchor. But because they hit all around and they do a lot of damage, you can make a lot of use out of Aside from just pure damage, you could do Guarding Strike, or you could do Weakening and Guarding Strike to affect as many enemies at once and make yourself purely invincible. But since also enemies that die fly straight up in the air, it is so fun to run Exploding, so the enemies just fly up and then rain down with Carpet Bombs, and I think I mentioned that in the other video too, but it's just so fun. The difference though between the Anchor and Encrusted Anchor is that Encrusted Anchor, just like the Vine Whip, has that same special poison built in, and its damage per second is even crazier than the Vine Whip, and that makes me think that it is based on the weapon's base damage, because these two weapons at 251 power, they hit for 2,147,149 damage, and that poison DPS just at base is like over 800,000 or a million, and just like with the Vine Whip, that poison damage does get increased by weapon damage buffs, like your armor damage buffs. You get it from Cowardice, you get it from Reckless, from Strength Potion, from Shadow Brew, from Sharpness. You would get it from Enchanting, especially Void Strike, Pain Cycle, Illager's Bane, Smiting, Ambush I'm pretty sure too. Just anything that is a straight damage multiplier aside from crit or committed that just affects your damage generally, that will affect the poison. But because of that built-in poison, that lets you run a few different things. The first 4 builds are the same as the Anchor. You got damage with Exploding, you've got damage with Guarding Strike, you've got damage with Weakening and Guarding Strike. I didn't mention Refresh for some reason, but you could run Refreshment. The downside being, though, that if the poison gets the kill with Encrusted Anchor, that could block critical Refreshment triggers that you would really want. But because it has the poison built in, you could also run Sharpness instead to boost the poison damage further. You could run triple Sharpness just for crazy initial poison damage to any enemy, and you would want to run that though with Lifesteal armor along with Poison Focus, but again, anything with Poison Focus works with this. Or you could run double Sharpness and Leeching for non-Lifesteal armor, or Sharpness and Guarding Strike. I personally prefer these two myself because I really love Exploding, and Guarding Strike works so well, but I also have this one, and just all of them very solid, very powerful. I love this weapon, one of my top favorites, and it definitely deserves an SS tier spot just for that poison damage one-shotting stuff alone. There's like almost nothing I can think of that it won't one-shot if you have a Gong of Weakening and maybe Strength Potion along with Void Strike. It's just that good. Especially because the Anchor's so slow, you get a lot more extra damage with Void Strike, like I mentioned in my other video. And now we move on to the final DLC weapons, and near the end of this almost 50-minute long video, we got Backstabber and Swift Striker. They not only possess high attack speed, but they have even more damage per second than Fighter's Bindings, which is insane. Since they are a bit slower than them too, it actually does make Leeching more ideal for them than Radiance, but they can run either or both. Really solid too. With Ambush built in, it does make Stunning just a bit more potent as well, so you could run full damage with Crit, Committed, Enchanting, and Leeching. You could do Committed, Enchanting, Guarding Strike, Leeching, there's a lot of Committed and Enchanting basically, so you can run with Gravity, you could run it with Radiance and Leeching, you could run it with Gravity or Enchanting with Stunning and Leeching, or you could do a Refreshment build, just very solid. Especially Swift Striker, since it has Echo built in for slightly faster attack speed. That means you can use Stunning just a little bit better to use along with Ambush. And I almost wondered for a second why I don't have Ambush mentioned, but that's because it's built in. So yeah, I didn't mess up there. I was just expecting me to have some kind of hiccup. Next we have pretty much the opposite of the Swift Striker. Even though Swift Striker and Backstabber do have pretty high damage per hits, they still more so focus on speed with little reach. Obsidian Claymore, though, is one of the 2 most hulking weapons in the game. With the second hit of its combo being literally the strongest hit in the game, it is over 2.18 million damage, whereas the Anchor is 2.14, something like that. And it has higher attack speed as well. But because of its speed, it makes it really good for Void Strike abuse, and its slow speed does not stop it from demolishing most mobs in 1 or 2 hits. Like, just from Void Strike alone, with just my Cowardice Renegade armor that has the extra 20% damage, just Void Strike alone on the second hit, I'm doing like 6.95 million damage, and if I have Enchanting trigger, it's 15 million damage on any enchanted mob on the second hit. It is crazy. For that, there's really only 3 best of the best combos you could run with it, but you could run Exploding, you could run Gravity, you could run weakening if you wanted to, but the 3 best would be pure damage with Void Strike, Enchanting, Committed, and Leeching. Or instead of Committed, you could run Guarding Strike for more defense, which is always the slightly better build because you don't need all that extra damage, and cutting the damage you take in half is better than increasing the damage you deal by maybe between 35 and 45%. And then you've got Refreshment for a Potion Barrier build, just very solid even if it's not a unique weapon. The difference between Obsidian Claymore and Starless Night is just that Starless Night has an enchant built in called Shared Pain, which is the damage you deal to a mob with that final hit, it kind of spreads that damage to nearby mobs to a degree. It is kind of a small spread, so on top of running the same enchants that an Obsidian Claymore can run, you might want to use Gravity just to group enemies into that Shared Pain damage. Otherwise, though, it is a beautiful looking sword, slightly different than Obsidian Claymore. It's got 2 extra jags instead of just this, or it's 2 jags instead of the 1. Both, though, really good, just the extra enchantment, and it looks so much nicer. But yeah, this is definitely an SS tier weapon as well. Speaking of SS tier, these 2 as well, the Beginning and the End and Void Touched Blades. I love these not just because they are dual-wield weapons, and I am a big sucker for weeb dual-wield crap, but they do have really high DPS, and even though they have low reach, they have also wide reach too, because one of the hits in the combo spins all around, and it just looks so flashy and it's so strong. But yeah, Void Touch Blades let you feel like the Black Swordsman with its stylish dual-wield combo that deals enough damage that, while fast, makes leeching a better choice on them most of the time. Though on the lower end of the speedy weapons, they can use stunning pretty well, and their AoE spin makes weakening decent on them too. They're a bit too fast to make full use of the Void Strike that's built into them, and it's only level 1 Void Strike, but hey, extra damage is extra damage. I can't complain. But yeah, for these, since they are faster and they also already have Void Strike built in, you could run full damage with Enchanting, Committed, Critical Hit, and Leeching, or you could replace Critical Hit with either Guarding Strike for defense, Radiance for more healing, Gravity to funnel enemies into those hits because of the reach, Weakening because of the wide reach, or you could just double up with Guarding Strike and Weakening, although this would be more for if you're using Lifesteal, which I should have mentioned here, but you could probably figure that out, that you don't want to use an armor that doesn't have any healing if your weapon doesn't have healing too. You want some kind of passive healing. But you can also run Gravity with Stunning and either Enchanting or Ambush, and then either Leeching or Radiance depending on what you want, because these weapons' base DPS is enough to run Leeching. It's not just if you have enchantments that increase your damage too. Now the Beginning and the End not only has a really cool name that sounds a lot like something from Kingdom Hearts, and also makes me think about the Wither being a reference to the beginning, and also with Leeching being in there, and then the End possibly being a reference to the Ender Dragon with the Void Strike built in. Since they are dual weapons, it makes me think maybe the weapons kind of embody the 2 weapons, maybe an incarnation of them. But yeah, they're very powerful, just like the Void Touched Blades. The difference is that they have Leeching built in, so especially if you're using them with Lifesteal armor, you can safely run no healing enchants whatsoever and just demolish. Like, I think my favorite setup is this one, which is Enchanting, Committed, Critical Hit, and Guarding Strike, which I think, luckily I didn't put that on the Void Touched Blades there. But you can also run Enchanting, Committed, Critical Hit, and Radiance for just extra healing too. You could do Guarding Strike instead of Crit. You can do Weakening instead of Guarding Strike and Crit. You could do Guarding Strike and Weakening, capitalizing on that built-in Leeching. Or you could just go full damage, adding in Sharpness, which I wasn't seeing a whole lot of use before that. Or, you know, just like with the Void Touched Blades, you could run Gravity, Stunning, Ambush, or Enchanting, and then since you don't have the option of Leeching, just run Radiance. Again, they are super fun weapons. They are one of my favorites. I think my top favorite list is increased so much more now because I think at least 2 of the weapons from the End DLC are in my favorites, but I really like Swift Striker too, so it's really hard. But yeah, these are generally 1 enchants you would want to run on your weapons for the best use, but not the only enchants. You know, some people with these one-hit weapons like, where are they? Soul Knife, Truth Seeker, Eternal Knife, Whip, Vine Whip, Pickaxe, Diamond Pickaxe, the hammers, etc. You might have a case for running Shockwave and Swirling. It's just there's so many really good enchant options now for damage that you really don't need to use that to pick off enemies from sniping distance. That is best left to Fighters' Bindings because they make such good use of Shockwave and Swirling, and they can use Radiance, and they can't use Void Strike really, so I mean, you can tag someone with Void Strike and then back away and hit them with Shockwave from, say, your Pickaxe to do extra damage that climbs because it's not resetting the multiplier, but think about it, you're hitting an enemy and then you're backing away to do that while they're rushing in at you, so it's best used maybe on bosses and stuff like that, but you kill so fast without it. That's why I would leave that to your discretion. I just wouldn't strongly recommend them personally. But yeah, that is what I would have to say for all the weapons. I know that this is almost an hour long, but I mean, let's face it, all of these different weapon enchant videos would have been like a half hour or 20 minutes at least each, so I just cut out a lot of time talking about all of them at once. Anyway, yep, my name is Shin. You can call me Shin for the win, whatever you want, previously Shinku no Yami. That's about all I have right now. This is a constantly changing guide, which I will again link in my description below. I'm going to probably post a reformed version of this on Reddit because I posted it back when I had errors and I have a lot of comments on that now, maybe pointing out some errors, and I want to add some things that I had left out. But yeah, other than that, this video does cover those things that I forgot, just so I could talk about them. Much better than people reading it for themselves and being like, what? This doesn't make any sense. I'm like, no, I meant this. But yeah, hopefully this helps you out just a little bit, makes things a little bit easier, and you know, also makes your RNG life a living hell now that you have something that you really want to focus towards and you gotta pray that the game gives it to you. But that is why I mentioned all of these other enchantments here, just because if the game's not as kind to you, there's other options that you could run almost as well as what the top ones would be. So, like I said, you won't fail if you're using different enchant combos, it just might be a little bit harder, but still, there's plenty of options that you have now with their Rebalance of Apocalypse plus 25, except for Levitation Shot, which is a god-awful, cursed, demonic enchant that the devs should never have added in. It makes me think that they hate us or something, because why does it stun us? Anyway, until next time, I've been Shin, and I will see you in the next video.